The MSI Claw is a new gaming handheld, which is something I find myself saying quite a lot these days. Since the launch of the Steam Deck, it seems every PC brand wants to get on board with their own version. At the moment, the market is quite saturated, from the ROG Ally to the Legion Go. Let's not even mention the dozens of Chinese models on the market too, of which are actually quite impressive. The difference with the MSI Claw, however, is the brand has partnered with Intel to include an Arc GPU inside the unit. This is the first for Intel and hopefully it pays off. The unit also goes by the name MSI Claw AIM, A1IM, which refers to the inclusion of the AIM Hall effect joysticks. These sticks don't use the traditional method of movement and are so-called drift-free. Although the MSI Claw isn't the first device to use these sticks either, both the Legion Go and the Iron Neo pack them. Still, it's great value for consumers anyway. The model in this review is the MSI Claw Ultra 7 model, so it's the highest tier variant you can get your hands on. I don't want to spend too much time giving you an overview of the product, so instead let's talk about the design, test the device out, and see how it stacks up against other models on the market. Given that this isn't the first PC handheld on the market, the MSI Claw's design is familiar. It features an all-black plastic shell with various buttons all over the place. The front includes the two joystick design with Mystic Light RGB around the rim. The sticks themselves feel pretty amazing. They are smooth and snap back into place without any issue. I don't entirely enjoy the nub on the stick itself though. There's barely any concave on the stick, only a slight, and I mean very slight, indent for your thumb. The surface isn't rubber either, instead it's a matte plastic material. The rubber is situated on the outside rim of the stick instead. It works, don't get me wrong, but if you're used to traditional rubber stick, this isn't as grippy and I found my finger sliding off the surface quite often. There's also the standard layout of buttons here too. You'll find the ABXY buttons on the one end and a D-pad on the other. The front is also home to a view button and the MSI Center M hotkey on the left of the display. There's also a menu button and a quick setting hotkey on the right of the display. Speaking of the display, the 7-inch touchscreen is a full HD 19x20x1080 display with a 120Hz refresh rate. It is an IPS panel and looks like an IPS panel. MSI says it has a 500 nit peak brightness. I measured 470 nits, which is good for a handheld of the size. It doesn't support HDR for gaming though. One of the biggest questions regarding the display is whether it packs VRR or not. The good news here is that it does. There's VRR on this 120Hz display, and you can toggle this in the Windows settings or the Visa Adaptive Sync settings in the Intel Graphics app. The coating on the display is quite reflective but manageable. If you play on the Ally or even the Switch, this is a similar experience. You'll also find the speakers on the front of the unit too. They are quite punchy for a handheld.
Those left behind there did not stand a chance. The world's greatest minds came together and found a vaccine against the Haran virus. Finally, mankind had prevailed against the disease. But people always want more. Despite a promise to shutter its labs.
MSI has included Nehemic on the unit, which lets you toggle various sound profiles depending on what you're doing. Everything sounded pretty impressive coming from the device. On the max loudness, you can even feel the sound vibrate in the unit itself. It makes everything you do so much more enjoyable. If you don't want to use the speakers, there's also an audio jack combo port at the top of the unit. This is found alongside the volume buttons, USB-C charging port which is powered by a 65-watt adapter. Next to that, you'll also find a micro SD card slot and a power button. The back is then home to the trigger buttons, which I feel are great to use. The LT and RT triggers are especially comfortable. They feature a slightly concave tip and a click sound that appears when you let go of the trigger. This sound seemingly comes from the button tapping against the LB and RB buttons above it. Then there are two macro keys at the back which are great to use. They have this strange off-pyramid shape to them which lets you press them in from either the left or the right hand side. So if you're holding the unit firmly and your middle finger is on the grip, you can quickly press it outwards to trigger the button. If you're resting your finger on the outer side, you can then press it inwards to do the same thing. It is a small detail but smart on MSI's part. Of course, it won't be fair to not discuss all the vents across the back of this unit because there's quite a lot of them. Not only does air shoot out the top of the MSI Claw, but the back is covered in air vents too. However, only a portion of these vents are actually used. There are two fans at the back, one on the left and one on the right, situated right next to the triggers. You can clearly see these fans under the light. The rest of the metal mesh is sealed, so don't think this device is one giant dust collector because the actual vents are only a fraction of the back's design. When it comes to the comfort, the MSI Claw is likely the most comfortable portable I've used. It is slightly larger than the ROG Ally and a lot larger than the Nintendo Switch. But the real comfort comes from its handheld grips. The concaved shoulder let me place the inner of my middle finger into the groove and it felt just right. The unit then sat on my hand and I never felt any strain whatsoever, even hours into gaming. I have quite large hands with really long fingers, and this device felt like it was made for me. I wish my other portables were this easy on my hands. The PlayStation Portal, for example, feels like there's no grip or resting place for your fingers at all. The MSI Claw, on the other hand, feels like it has been formed around your hand. I'm sure you can already tell that I did enjoy the general design of the MSI Claw, although I wish there was an OLED here instead. The unit includes everything you'll look for from a portable, but its comfort is especially a standout for me. Then we go into the performance and usability of the unit, and it's a hit and a miss at times. The MSI Claw uses a custom skinned MSI Center overlay to function, which means there's an app running on top of Windows and you can launch games and make changes to the settings on the fly. However, it isn't great. The system overlay definitely needs work. The experience is cumbersome. Right from the start, I was met with wonky menus that didn't work. The keyboard would often refuse to pop up when I needed it to. When it appeared, I would then have to type something using the most minuscule touch keyboard I've ever seen. I also had issues where the Wi-Fi password kept telling me it was incorrect. Meanwhile, I checked it countless times and it wasn't. However, when I entered the password in the Windows settings, it worked. The MSI Center just refused to authenticate it. I think perhaps the API between the Windows setting and the MSI overlay simply doesn't work properly. Granted, the overlay is easy to get around, but it doesn't help that things don't work properly. Launching a game, for example, would work using the buttons on the unit, but then I would have to touch the screen for the Steam client to register I was actually there. When playing games, the device would then think I was using a mouse and keyboard even after turning the gamepad mode on countless times. At times the games would just not register the buttons. What does work just fine are the tweaks to the power modes and other settings. Changing the screen brightness and power profiles, for example, did register correctly. The issue just seems to stem from when the MSI Center M needs to talk to Windows. There's an obvious disconnection here. Of course, these issues can be fixed with updates, and MSI says they're going to be constantly improving the experience for the users. We did see a similar event with the ROG Ally, which also had various UI issues at launch. Asus also had to release some major updates to increase the system's performance and UI usability. Speaking of a performance update, MSI says the company is planning on patching the device with various performance tweaks in the coming weeks. This is supposedly going to increase the performance of the Intel Arc GPU. So the tests you see today might change as they patch the device, but don't expect any drastic changes. I would not look at these numbers as the final performance of this unit. I don't think that would be fair just yet. Asus had a similar issue with the ROG Ally 2, where I had to redo my entire benchmark list after the company patched the device with an update to boost the performance. We saw tests increase by up to 30%. Will the Claw get the same boost? I don't think it's possible due to the specs of the Arc GPU, but some tweaking will enhance the performance slightly. With that being said, I did run some tests across Cyberpunk 2077, Returnal and Dying Light 2. I ran these tests across various power modes, including the plugged-in max TGP, which is 40 watts on this unit. I also ran these tests on the 20 watt portable mode on battery. I also ran them across 720p and 1080p resolution. Keep in mind that these tests were all with Intel ZES enabled and set to performance, with the game quality varying depending on the game. I'm mostly stuck to the low settings on most games, as this is likely where you'll start your game from and slowly bump up the graphics as you try to balance performance and visuals. The tests show that this built-in Intel Arc Ultra 7 definitely has its work cut out for it when it comes to matching the other competition on the market. At the device's current state, without these so-called Intel updates, the chip performed at about 3/4 the capacity of the AMD Z1 Extreme at a higher power profile. So essentially, you would have to bypass the Intel GPU's power use and increase it to 60 watts in order to match the same performance on the AMD Z1 Extreme running at only 30 watts. I don't think firmware updates will fix this issue. MSI might be able to get a bit more juice from this chipset and boost it by say 15% max, but already on paper the Intel Arc GPU is statistically weaker than the AMD Z1 Extreme. You would need to physically add performance to the chip, which of course can't be done. When MSI announced the Claw, we already knew the performance would not be up to par with other devices already on the market, so these tests don't come as a surprise. This also means the MSI Claw might have a tough time competing with other handhelds. While I do enjoy the build quality and how comfortable the unit is, performance is the first thing you look at, and you'll need to keep in mind how far this unit can go. Overall, I do enjoy the MSI Claw for what it is. The comfort is the best I experienced on the market, and the added Hall effect joysticks make a big difference. The battery life, however, is just okay. Using it in handheld mode without it plugged into an outlet lasted about an hour and 20 minutes while using the device's balanced mode, which kept the wattage at roughly 25 watts. If you max out the performance, you're going to get just under an hour, at times perhaps 45 minutes. None of these portable gaming devices include an impressive battery, so this pretty much lines up with other models too. The MSI Claw, however, is a tough recommendation considering this unit costs more than the ROG Ally and Steam Deck and performs at 30% less efficiency. If perhaps this unit was cheaper, it could be a great option for entry-level portable gamers, but at this price tag, why would anybody go for it? In South Africa, the unit is launching at the highest price tag for the Ultra 5 model, which means the Ultra 7 model is going to be even more expensive. Even then, that version would not be able to match the ROG Ally or Steam Deck. To make matters worse, there's no real selling advantage on the MSI Claw, which will perhaps push you towards the unit. If it offered a catch, maybe, but this is another gaming handheld device that is trying to offer the same experience as other gaming handheld devices. But the only difference here is you're paying more for less, so it's a tough one. Perhaps Intel will be able to squeeze a bit more performance out of the Claw in the future with some updates, but I don't think these updates are going to drastically improve the landscape. So those are my thoughts on the MSI Claw. Are you looking to pick one up? Let me know in the comments down below. As usual, thanks for watching, and please do consider liking and subscribing for more future content like this. Also be sure to visit glitch.online for more gaming tech news and reviews. Until next time, farewell.